Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Rajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vallachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vallachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravachakacharya Stotara Satta Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Kori Vaishnav Ki ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Premchira Hoja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Srimad Bhagavatam Gantaraj Ki Oh glorious the symbol of voice Oh glorious the symbol of voice Oh glorious symbol of voice Oh glorious the Shri Guru and Gauranga Oh Brahmananda Hey So today we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Further Inquiries by Vidura, Chapter 7, Text 37. So Vidura is asking about a whole variety of subject matters in his second bout of questions to his spiritual master, Maitreya Muni. So, text number 36. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Anuvratanam Sisyanam Putranam Cha Vijotama Anaprishtam Api Bruyu Guravo Dinavatsala Anuvratanam Sisyanam Putranam Chat Vijotama Anupristam Api Bruyu Guravo Dinavatsala Anuvratanam Sisyanam Putranam Chadvijotama Anuprishtam Api Bruyu Guravo Dinavatsala Anuratanam Sisyanam Putranam Chadvijotama Anuprishtam Api Bruyu Guravo Dinavatsala. Anuvratanam, the followers, Sishyanam, of the disciples, Putranam, of the sons, Cha, also, Dvija Uttama, best amongst the Brahmanas, Anaprishtam, that which is not asked for, Api, in spite of, Mruyu, please describe, Gurava, the spiritual masters, Dinavatsala, who are kind to the needy. O best amongst the Brahmanas, those who are spiritual masters, very kind to the needy. They're always kind to their followers, disciples and sons, and without being asked by them, spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. Purport. There are many subjects to be known from the bona fide spiritual master. The followers, disciples and sons are all on one level for the bona fide spiritual master. And he is always kind to them and always speaks to them on transcendental subjects, even though he is not asked by them. That is the nature of the bona fide spiritual master. Vidura appealed to Maitreya Muni to speak on subjects about which he might not have asked. Amakena Timirandasya Janandana Slakya Chaksun Litam Yena Tasme Shri Guruve Namaha Durga Me Parimendasya Skalat Patekati Muhu Swakripa Yustu Danena Shandru Shandru Alambanam. So we're speaking very clearly, we know what this sloka is about. It's about the spiritual master-disciple relationship. So I was thinking that let's go back to our lineage, our sampradaya, and see where the relationships, how they transpired between some of the gurus in our disciplic succession. So we go back, probably we can go back to the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the 6 Goswamis in Vrindavan to glean some examples of how spiritual master associated with his disciples in our lineage. So we have, we can't see the picture of the 6 Goswamis there, but they were all sent to Vrindavan. They were all exalted personalities. They were sent there by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to unearth the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, which happened about 4,500 years ago, and also establish religious principles, or the principles by which Vaishnavism can be served in this age of Kali Yuga, at least in this next 10,000 years. So we have this wonderful prayer called the 6 Goswami, Sad Goswami Ashtaka, written by Srinivas Goswami. I would just like to chant the first verse. Krishna Kirtana Gananatara Paro Premam Rintambo Nidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyo Priyakaro Nirmatsaro Pujito Shri Chaitanya Kripavaro Bhuvi Bhuvo Parava Antarako Vande Rupa Sanatana Jago Shri Jiva Gopalaku. Translation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and dancing. They are just like the ocean of love of Godhead, and they are popular both with the gentle and with the ruffians, because they are non-envious of anyone. Whatever they do, they are all pleasing to everyone, and they are fully blessed by Lord Chaitanya. Thus they are engaged in missionary activities meant to deliver the conditioned souls in this material existence. So in our disciplic succession, we're also called Rupa Nugas, that we follow after Rupa Goswami, who is the principal of all the Goswamis. And here we have the symptoms of Rupa Goswami: chanting and dancing and always ecstatic. So he's always ecstatic, big smile. That's the symptom of Vaishnava, that he's always engaged in transcendental service, and he's always got a smile on his face. So we're just sort of doing a bit of rain check here. We can ask Satvatana Prabhu, how are you feeling today, Prabhu?
Better to be in your association.
Better than yesterday.
Well, better in your association.
Oh, thank you very much. So, just picked on him because I saw a little bit of it. So I'm feeling great. I always got taught this by one lady, that even if you don't always feel good on a Monday morning. Oh, I had a hard night last night. We were dancing and chanting. I feel so tired. I've got a head cold. It was like, ate too much. No one knows that. Just, how you feeling, Prabhu? Great. I'm feeling ecstatic. So I got taught to do that by this lady. I said, how are you today? And this lady, her name was Pujita. I don't know if you remember her. She come along. All of a sudden, I just come back from Harinam or something, and this lady was sitting in my chair. She had a neck brace and she had a walking stick. She could hardly walk. And she got initiated. She taught me everything I knew about accountancy, how to open books, shut books, and she got me my first MasterCard and bank card. She was just terrific, right? And you go up to her and you say, how are you feeling, Pujita? Terrific. I'm feeling great. And she'd tell that to everybody, right? Because it's infectious. If you feel great, like, oh, yeah, right, really good. So that's for us, we actually should feel great, because actually anything else that makes us feel miserable is the affliction of the material modes of nature. So like we say in yoga, the first thing we do in yoga is we set our intentions. So we map out our service for the day, we thrust all the negatives aside, and we become inspirational. That's the duty of a Vaishnava. Can't go wrong. So the Goswamis, they're all ecstatically chanting. We hear that from Rupa and Sanatan, the Krishna Katha all the time, chanting so many rounds, Mahamantra, writing so many books. And because they were so fully engaged that even Krishna and Radharani, they were so attracted by their bhakti that they would come down from the spiritual, subliminal Vrindavan, which is not visible to our material eyes, but Vrindavan is eternal. It is always there for those who have eyes to see. And they would reciprocate with them in some form or another and further heighten their ecstasy. And so many of these stories about Krishna and Radharani that were narrated to us, that all these little gems are written by the Goswamis. They used to go under some desire tree and they'd be sitting and meditating on Krishna, and then Krishna would reveal his pastimes at that particular place, what happened, and then they would be able to document that and heighten our ecstasy. So one may think that on that level, the Goswamis were so exalted that there would be a barrier. Someone's a pure devotee, so therefore they were so very, very chaste, and they wanted the purity around them, that they actually would not want to associate with anybody. It's just people would steer clear and just have that mood of, this is a great saintly person, so we just approach him very, very humbly and just put something down there for him, and thank you very much, and walk away, that mood of awe and reverence. But actually, that was not the case, because actually in this song that we just sang, in this verse that I just chanted, said that the Goswamis, they were intimate, they were very, very gentle with they would equally associate with the gentle and the ruffians alike. So we have the story of Rupa Goswami, who used to like to go into all the neighbouring villages and say hello to all the people in the village. And they would be so happy to see him, because they would treat him as an affectionate father. He would ask about their cows and their kids, and the neighbours and the villagers would explain all the difficulties, how they had trouble getting their daughter married or their cow was sick, and he would listen, and he would stay in that village, and he would associate with all the villagers, and they didn't want him to leave everywhere he went. They would cry when he left, so he was so popular. So that was the nature, even though of a spiritual master, that loving association. So Rupa Goswami, he only had one disciple, I think, and that was Jiva Goswami. And with his disciple, it was absolute strictness, because it's according to the level of spirituality that you have, that level of association that you develop. So he was very strict about the principles and etiquettes. And in that era, the disciple would live close by to his spiritual master, or with his spiritual master, and he would serve him very, very nicely. So this was the tradition. Lokanath Goswami, who had wonderful association with the devotees, or actually Lokanath, and I think his disciple Srinivas took shelter of Jiva Goswami, and Srinivas was looking for a spiritual master, and they were really hard to find in those days. So he went looking for Lord Chaitanya, went looking for Lord Nityananda. That all passed away. He went to Vrindavan and by the time he got there, Rupert passed away, Sanatan passed away, and he wrote this wonderful song called Anila Premadana. We sing when we observe any pastime where some great soul has passed away. We sing that prayer. And in the end, they said, all I can do is just beat my head against the wall. I've missed out with such great association with all these people. But he was fortunate enough to take the shelter of Jiva Goswami. He was one of the last Goswamis that was left, and Jiva was the disciple of Rupa Goswami. And he was instructed so wonderfully by Jiva Goswami. And so with Shyamananda, they were told to take Shyamananda, another beautiful devotee who took shelter of Hridaya Chaitanya Maharaj in that era. So this was just after Lord Chaitanya, and all the Bengali Vaishnavas were just feeling so much separation because all the Lord of their heart had gone, Nityananda had gone, everybody disappeared, and they were really bereft of feeling like they were bereft of the association of Krishna, and they were really down. So at that point in time, all these wonderful literatures had been written in Vrindavan describing the pastimes of Krishna, which was the purpose of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to spread the glories of Krishna in his pastimes and his chanting. So they took all these literatures, transport all these literatures to Bengal to enlighten all the Vaishnavas. So this was the mood of the disciples and the spiritual masters there, that they were very, very elevated souls, completely absorbed in that process of spreading Krishna consciousness and chanting the Lord's names. And they're all pretty much, a lot of them were associates of Krishna that had come down to help spread this Krishna consciousness. So this lineage continued on. This was in 1500s, late 1500s. This lineage continued, but then in the middle of the 1800s, it began to thin out a bit. If we can say it was the ravages of Kali Yuga, it was influences of impersonalism. They were under heavy Islamic rulers, and then the British rule came along, the British monarchy, and they frowned upon any practice of Hinduism, and they tried to discourage it. So by the time Bhaktivinoda came along, he took birth, and he was a great soul. And this picture of Bhaktivinoda we have here in the mid-1840s. He was very, very learned. He went through the process of learning English and became a High Court judge. And he saw that the deterioration of Vaishnavism, and he was concerned. In fact, he was trying to search out Chaitanya Charitamrita to find out more about Lord Chaitanya, and he couldn't find one. It was very difficult that the Chaitanya Charitamritas, which had been printed so many hundred years ago and distributed, they were getting to be quite rare. But he did find one, and he became enamored by Vaishnavism, and he decided to excavate that birthplace where Lord Chaitanya's birthplace. And it was quite interesting because there's a book called the Jaiva Dharma, in which Lord Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya's brother, took Jiva Goswami on a tour of Navadvip, and he explained in that book, he said that actually in 100 years, the Ganga is going to overwhelm this whole birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's going to be hidden away for 300 years, and then it will become revealed again, right? So, at that point in time, Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was looking, and he went to Surabi Kunj. This is, we all know the confluence of the Ganga and the Surabi Kunj in Mayapur. And the wonderful thing is that it's two different coloured rivers. The Surabi, so got this black clarity, and the Ganga River sort of got this muddy colour, and they sort of meet at the confluence there. So Bhaktivedanta Thakur built a house just a little bit further away from that. It's still there, we can visit. And he was standing on the balcony of his house and he looked across the river and he could see this shining glow in the distance. And he immediately decided to investigate that, and he went to this place. It was just a clump of bushes, and there was a lot of tulsi trees there, and there was a neem tree there close by. So he thought to himself that this is the place. So he brought his preceptor. It wasn't his spiritual master, but his Diksha guru, Jagannath Das Babaji, who was 120 years old, and he could hardly see. His eyes were drooped over. He just had to prop up his eyelids to see. He could see, but his eyes, and he was brought in a basket, and they put him down, and he said, Babaji, is this the birthsite of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He opened his eyes and looked, and immediately he became ecstatic, and he started jumping up and down, Haribol, 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 jumping high into the air. And so this was and he began chanting Lord Chaitanya's holy name. So this confirmed the fact that we had found the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this ushered in the 20th century and the new wave of Krishna consciousness, because one of his sons, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, became a very, very strong Vaishnava. In fact, he was called the Lion Guru. And he began to spread Krishna consciousness across India. Well, by his strength, his lion type of personality, that he was very, very erudite scholar and a great Vaishnava, very renounced. There's a famous picture of him observing Chatumas, and he was in this thatched hut which was leaking. And there's a picture of him holding up an umbrella and reading the Shastras. You've seen that picture? So he's very austere. So he began to excavate, re-establish. He built a very beautiful place, which we call the Yoga Pit, which we go to now in Mayapur, which is the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And if you haven't been there for a while, you'll get a surprise at how big it is now. The Bhaktivedanta Foundation has built a big hall where we go there, and at the start of all the parikrams, where we go to all the whole place around Mayapur, we go to that place, and sometimes we have 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 Vaishnavas all crammed into that place there. It's very intimate. Jaipatak Maharaj rolls along and gets out of the car, and Hari Bol gives a great lecture. And so that it sort of activates us, animates us to go on all these places pilgrimage. So we go to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthplace to start. So Bhaktisiddhanta was very, very strict with his disciples. So now we have that situation where people are embracing Vaishnavism, and he wanted complete surrender to Krishna consciousness if you will become his disciple. And sometimes his disciples would be afraid of him. He would be chanting. We just found that place where he'd chant on his veranda. We found his house. There's this temple, and further along is the house where he stayed. And be walking up and down the veranda chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, so loudly that was like a lion. It was fearsome. The devotees were too scared to go near. But Srila Prabhupada explained that even though he was such a fearsome guru, of course he was so soft and gentle to Srila Prabhupada, but Srila Prabhupada used to say, treat him like your grandfather. He's very, very soft to his grandchildren, grand disciples, so you can pray to him. I don't know, somewhere back in my past I felt like I had a dream about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati one day when I was out there on the Sankirtan, and he was very, okay, they're very nice disciples, your disciples are very nice, like that, very gentle tone. Maybe I imagined it, but I imagine this is how he was, right? So it's this, Prabhupada explained it's just like sometimes a grandfather's very diligent towards his grandsons. He gave the example of Henry Ford, that Henry Ford had so much in his day that he had, factories everywhere, cars all around the world, and, nobody could see Henry Ford without an appointment. Someone would like to see him and say, oh, no, you can't see him, he's busy. And then one time, one person opened the door, and there he's playing with his grandson. His grandson's on top of him, and he's the horse, and he's going, giddy up, like that, So that's the situation between the grandfather and grandson. So similarly for all the disciples now of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada's also your grandfather, so you can understand that he's very, very merciful to all the grand disciples here. So his relationship with Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was that Bhakti Siddhanta appreciated him so much because not only was he a learned scholar like him, that he'd been to Scotch College and learned how to speak English properly. In those days, Scottish English, an accent that was rather hard to understand in the beginning, but as you see in his lectures further along the line, he actually became more lucid and easier to understand for us Western disciples. But he heard submissively with attention and followed his instructions. So Bhakti Siddhanta said, you've got a big task. He said, I want you to take this mission to the Western world. Bhakti Siddhanta had already spread it throughout India, but now it was the time to spread it throughout the world. This is the prediction of Lord Chaitanya, Prachivate Tato Nada Harigram Sarvapa Sarvi Hobi Prachara Hobi Morinam, that in every town and village throughout the whole world, the chanting of Hare Krishna would be heard. So this was the weight on the shoulders of Srila Prabhupada, that he had been given these instructions by his spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada actually took this to heart, even though he was instructed the last time in 1934, still he had that intention for many, many years. And in 1956, when he took sannyas order, he was able to focus completely on his mission, and he went to Vrindavan and he translated the first 3 volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And armed with some Bhagavatams that he got printed, 2 trunkloads, he got a free ticket. He asked this lady, he had no money, he was a sannyas, no money, none. He had hardly a few paisa. Sometimes he would walk so many blocks on the street just to save a few paisa because he didn't have money for transport. He wanted it for printing. Everything he had to use for printing. He'd get spare paper. Paper was really difficult to come by in those days. He would use it to write upon and then print these books. So he had these books, and this lady, very generous lady from a steamship company, she said, look, you're old, but I can't convince you not to go. 69 years old. All I've got is a passage on a steamship to New York. I'll take it. So Srila Prabhupada hopped on the boat, and even though he wasn't well, he had heart problems, and the boat was really rough. You can imagine a cargo ship sailing across the ocean, hitting storms, and there wasn't much comfort there. So somehow or other, Prabhupada said that Krishna protected him, even though he had 1 or 2 heart attacks on that boat. Still, Krishna protected him and took him there to that destination where he came, and it was very, very difficult for him in the beginning because he had nothing, but gradually made his way down to the lower east side, and he met great souls like Mukunda Maharaj, who was able to help him open up a little storefront there on the 2nd Avenue. And this is where some people started to come. So Srila Prabhupada would use the old adage of chanting and dancing and eating prasadam. So he would chant, bring people back, they were attracted by the chanting, and he would have a feast ready. So they would eat this chapatis and dal and rice, and they've never eaten that before because they've just been used to Western food, and they were just so, the aromatic taste of all the beautiful spices from India just completely enchanted their senses, you might say. And they would stay there and they'd be so blissful, and then the word started to spread. But what happened was that Srila Prabhupada would be doing all of this. He'd cook, and then they'd all go, and then he'd have to clean up, wash all the pots, and and then do it all over again the next day. He was so humble, just trying to get the move going. One day it was said that one fellow stayed behind, and he was seeing that everybody had just gone, and there's just all empty plates and dishes everywhere. And he thought to himself, maybe the Swami needs a hand. I would say, Swami, would you like some help? And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, that would be very nice. So from that point in time, the service began to start, and he began to initiate people. And that was in a very, very easy way. All of a sudden there's a fire sacrifice, and you have a new name. Your name's Kittananda, your name's Mukunda, your name's Gargamuni, your name's Brahmananda. And they go, oh yeah, that's really good. They've got a spiritual name. And they were committed to the Swami, but nothing much had changed except the fact that they accepted that they would follow the 4 regular principles: no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex. And gradually, as their faith in their spiritual master and their service and their commitment began to expand, then Srila Prabhupada started to give further and further instructions on the principle of Vaishnavism. You couldn't give it all at once because it was just too much of a sort of cultural transition. So gradually it became introduced that people would shave their heads, and then the ladies, they would begin to wear saris, and the tilak came in, and so on and so forth. And then the principles of brahmachari or grihastha ashram, they said, well, if you're associating together, well, you should get married. And they would listen to all this advice. And gradually the principles of Vaishnavism began to sink into these devotees. And we can see after 1 year or 2 years, we'd have these bright shining, after a couple of years, we'd have these bright shining devotees with bald heads and saffron robes. And I know when they came to Sydney, first landed in Sydney in Australia, they were a big sensation on the front page of the news. The Hare Krishnas arrived in Australia. Right? There's only 2 of them. And we'd see that, what was his name? Huh? Well, Pendra, yeah. There's a really famous picture of Pendra. They're having a kirtan, Bali Madang kirtan. Bali's playing the kartals, the Pendra's playing the madanga and singing, and he's giving out pamphlets at the same time to people while he's playing the drum, right? And of course, that started to spread also. And Srila Prabhupada, he made nearly 5,000 disciples in that 11-year period of time. And of course, I came in at the tail end. So by that time, the principle of the spiritual master and the disciple relationship was that Srila Prabhupada was considered to be the all-powerful, representative, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he was treated with so much respect by the disciples. And even though Srila Prabhupada was gentle and, very, very caring towards the disciples, at other different times when something crossed over that wasn't very pleasing to him, he would very certainly sort of let the disciple know that he was unhappy about their service, the defect in their service, you might say. So we describe Srila Prabhupada as being soft as a rose and hard as a thunderbolt. So nobody wanted that thunderbolt of Srila Prabhupada. We all want to see Srila Prabhupada smile. So when I joined up, it was like a question of Srila Prabhupada was, the personal service was distant. So we have this saying, Vani and Vapu. So Vani means the association of the personal association. No, it's the other way. Vapu. Vapu means the personal association of spiritual master. So we see going back a few hundred years that was a sort of paramount important thing that the disciple associates with the spiritual master and receives that fine, intricate training from the spiritual master, all the details there of Vaishnavism, so he can embody Vaishnavism to the full extent in accordance to the teaching of disciplic succession. But here it was different. So we only had we didn't have the vapu, the personal association, but we had the instructions. And of course, the purpose of Srila Prabhupada was that he wrote all these different, all the literatures that he wrote. The Srimad Bhagavatam, he completed up to the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, and so many other different books, Nectar of Instruction, Nectar of Devotion, all the literatures there that we needed to perfect our devotional service. So we had to leave him alone, in other words. The disciples couldn't badger the spiritual master because he had a bigger task at hand. And what we did is we received this instruction through the books. I know when we were distributing books in the country somewhere, we'd open up a case of books and here was a new Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 5th canto, 6th canto, things we'd never heard before, about the demigods flying on their, King Indra on his 3-headed elephant, or Lord Vishnu coming down on his Garuda carrier. So many wonderful exotic stories that opened up our knowledge of the Vedic literatures and all the different incarnations of Krishna, and so many, and the wonderful aspects of the disciples of the great devotees of the Lord, like Prahlad and so many others, and stories about Narad Muni. So it expanded our consciousness. So this is our process of Vaishnavism. But Prabhupada also famously said that all his disciples should become spiritual masters. That was that Sadhguru Vibhika Chet, something that everyone should become a spiritual master. In principle, that was fine, but it's like Prabhupada says here in the purport, it's a question of bona fides. That, we have the word bona fide, so we need bona fides if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a accountant, whatever. You have to have your qualifications. So what the qualifications that are required for a spiritual master, we can go to the Nectar of Instruction, where the first aphorism is Vacho Vegam Manasako Vegam Jiva Vegam Prasta Vegam Etan Veganyo Saheti Ra Sarvamapinam Pritivam Sashishya. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Right? But not only that, we also have in the Bhagavad Gita 4:34, that famous verse that just about every Vaishnava knows, Tad Vidi Panipatina Pariprasya and the Sevaya Padekshya Teganam Gyaninas Darshana, that just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, hear from him submissively, and render service unto him. The spiritual master will impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So in that way, we're to follow these processes. So when Srila Prabhupada left, he established this disciplic succession, that he appointed some people to become spiritual masters. But the fact was that some of these, the bona fides, hadn't been completely established, that there was some contamination there by the material modes of nature, which wasn't evident right in the beginning, but as the years went by, then material nature caused a big sort of chasm in the service of the person, and some of those people who were spiritual masters fell away from their practice. So that was quite disastrous, and that reverberated through our society, probably still to this day. But so the fact that Prabhupada said that we should all become spiritual masters is true to the extent that we have three sorts of spiritual masters. We have, that was the Diksha Guru, but we also have the Shiksha, the instructions that are given to people who want to know about Krishna consciousness. That's also a Shiksha Guru, and then there's a Pradakshina Guru, one who actually tells people about Krishna in the first instance, even though they might not know anything about it. They just tell about the experience, and the person says, yeah, I want to experience that. So that works, right? So there's those types of gurus. But more prominent now is the Shiksha Guru. So for the Diksha Guru these days, we've learned from the society's learned from its mistakes, and so there's much more rigid qualifications required for someone who wants to become a guru, that they have to undergo so much learning and a process of training or process of, 5 years or 10 years sort of internship. And then once that is there and someone reaches the age of 50, then they may be qualified to become a guru, because this is essential in our society, that the disciplic succession is going on. And as we know, our society has spread so much. Prabhupada had 5,000 disciples. I really don't know how many Vaishnavas there are in the world today. You can sort of pick a figure between 50,000 and 5 million. I don't know, So there's different degrees of Vaishnavism, but also the other thing that we have now is the social media. So this has turned things around a fair bit, that the disciple now can get contact with his spiritual master through social media. He can hear the lectures, he can send texts, and he can communicate with his spiritual master like that. So this has opened up a whole new exciting age and another different relationship between the spiritual master and the disciples. So a lot of the disciples now that are initiated by their spiritual master, who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, the grand disciples, they are forging their own relationship with their spiritual master, and they're preserving the principles of Krishna consciousness. So we've got the principle of Yukta Vairagya, that whatever we've got we can utilize in Krishna service. But the main thing is that we're Vaishnavas, and we ask, how are you going today? I'm going great, Prabhu. And chanting Hare Krishna is really good. So that's how it is from my perspective. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yeah.
A question, Vasu. The last line.
Hang on, take that, yeah.
The last line in the purport, Prabhupada says, Vidura appealed to Maitreya Muni to speak on subjects about which he might not have asked. I guess he's hoping Maitreya will expand, I guess.
Yeah, because sometimes when the spiritual master starts talking about certain things, like the next sloka, well, talk about the dissolution of the material universe. So to properly explain the dissolution of the material universe, the spiritual master might have to go in the capacity of, you've got Lord Shiva in his capacity of Rudra. He expands into 11 Rudras, and then it talks about the different situations in which that universe happens, which is beyond beyond what the disciple knew. So this happens all the time. If someone asks us to go into a question, sometimes you have to go back to the Bhagavatam to talk about, or the Sringade ripping apart Hiranyakasipu or something, or Prahlad going through that treatment by Hiranyakasipu. So it describes, you expand, it's like a folder. So you might ask one question, but you get this whole expansion of the philosophy there. So that is my understanding. Also, just like what Srila Prabhupada has done with his disciples, he's taken them through till they get to that level where they can understand more about the aspect of pure Vaishnavism. So I think Vidura is asking Maitreya to take him through what, it's just like Krishna says, he preserves what you have and carries what you lack. So if he was lacking in some capacity and his spiritual master could find that, he could actually fill in that gap. So that's sort of my meditation on that particular sentence. So
Hare Krishna. Is that on?
Hold it down. Just hold the button down. Hold it on.
Haribol, Haribol.
Yeah.
My question is, I can understand that positive of saying, I'm fantastic. Fake it till you make it, and I'm sure that will have a lot of benefit for you to think like that. But at the same time, I think sometimes we are going through something or we don't feel very well. So I was just wondering if you can make a comment, just ignore that, or...
well, it's, the soul is always blissful. That is the whole essence of that. So if someone comes up to you, it's like a checkout girl in the supermarket will come up and say, how are you feeling today? What are you going to tell her? I know what my mother used to say. She said, oh, darling, I'm not very well today. And she'd start talking all about ills and aches and pains, and everybody would be waiting to let's just go. And she didn't mean that, She just would say, fine.
She won't ask the next one.
Right? So that's on the sort of surface level. But then if you are feeling some angst, and it says you confide in your, God brothers and God sisters, you go to the next level, someone's on the same platform as you are, and you talk to them, and if it's really deeply serious, you can go higher to some deeper authority, but do you really need to bother them? That's the other thing, it just might be a passing thing. And of course, you sort of pray to Krishna for mercy. So you sort of make that distinction too.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, we're on 3 seconds to go. The bell's going to ring any second. So thank you very much for your
Thank you,
time.
Vasu.
I will wish you a